about this. Welcome. Last round we are actually out of handouts which we were not supposed to bring. So, but we will be glad to we will be glad to actually send you a PDF of this. If do we have a sheet of paper? Can we send a sheet of paper around if anybody wants that? We'll just put your email on there and we will we'll send you a PDF of the handout we were not supposed to bring. So, what we were looking at is the transparency. Evaluating the transparency of environmental sustainability reporting on the web of Fortune 50 companies. And so it's a survey or a content analysis of the efforts of sustainability reporting by these Fortune 50 companies through their websites only. So there's a lot of information we don't know about why they do things, the way that they do, but we're just looking at what they do. To give you the general summary of this, for the most part, most Fortune 50 companies are reporting something about the environment. 80%, so 40 out of the 50 are reporting. They have some kind of environmental information. They, for the most part, have web pages with downloadable PDFs of a report. And so what we're seeing, even though we have the web, which can be a very interactive medium, it is still primarily a static, one-way communication effort on their parts to report sustainability, rather than taking advantage of the medium of the web. It's primarily just to make that information more accessible to anybody who wants to find it. So access seems to be the main purpose for providing that information on the web. But even as early as 2000, there were many scholars saying that the web would provide lots of other opportunities, such as two-way communication and interaction between stakeholders and the corporation about the environment, integrated technologies whereby they could do real-time reporting by linking their web-based reporting to other databases that they are keeping updated, throughout the year. We're still not seeing that. We're still seeing them pretty much just providing a report from last year. So most of the data that you're seeing is 6 to 8 months old, by the time you actually see it, rather than real-time reporting. So they're not taking advantage of the technology that's there. The very few even have streaming videos or interactive media or something that makes it really interesting. They're pretty much static, one-way communication reports. So the main reason for using the web seems to be just getting access. So you'd think that if that's the real purpose of it, they would make it easier to find this information on their website, that the access would be the primary purpose for that. In reality, we're finding that that's not necessarily the case. Only 38% of the companies that we looked at had a link on their home page, their front page, that took them to some kind of information about their environment and environmental performance. Everything else, you had to know where to look. And you were usually 2 to 3 clicks from ever finding that information. And usually you had to know that you had to go to something about, like an About Us link. It's at the very bottom of the page in 6-point type. And you click on that, that'd take you to the corporate page. On the corporate page, you'd have to find where the environmental reporting was. That would take you to the eventual site, something like that. If you didn't know that, and we became very familiar with being able to how to find that in a short rate of time, but the average person may not know how to go about looking for that. So they're not making it very accessible at that same time. In terms of looking at the transparency indicators, what we were looking at is stakeholder involvement. How much do they involve the stakeholders in the reporting process? How much are they providing truly substantial information or information that would inform the stakeholders about their evaluation or opinion about the organization? Openness, how accessible and easy to read was the information, and accountability. How much were they holding themselves accountable? Were they providing this information that really holds them accountable to their performance? So once again, they're not doing very well on the involvement area. Only one of the websites had a blog. 2 websites had discussion forums. For the most part, the only way to really interact was through sending an inquiry through contact information. And only 38% of those that reported on, or 38% of those that reported environmental information actually had a contact within the environmental section of their website. In other words, if you wanted to contact and ask a question about the environment, you were just sending it through their general contact. It just goes to Walmart.com. You don't know who's going to actually receive it, where it's actually going to go. But 38% actually had an environmental contact somebody who was responsible for environmental reporting that you could contact and ask. Now we have no idea. It probably would have been interesting. We should have sent out some inquiries to find out. Actually, I did one. I have not received a response yet. So. So it'd be interesting. We have no idea whether they're actually providing that. But what's interesting within the blog, and I'll let Peter talk about that because he reviewed the one that did the blog. They're not really using the blog the way they should be.
So what we're seeing is that, of course, the trend seems to be that the adoption of these interactive or integrated technologies is a slow matter. It's taking much longer than most people would have anticipated, especially when considering, for how long that this research has been going on, that the pickup of that technology has been pretty slow. But what we see is that even in the cases where it is picked up, that was a shift that was able to happen, but then the actual utilization of those technologies for the purposes of being more open, of engaging stakeholders, we're not seeing them used in that capacity. So a good example is the discussion forums that we've seen and the blogs that we've seen provide a great opportunity, it seems, for stakeholders to interact with one another. But for any sort of response to their comments from or their ideas from the company are non-existent. So we're not even talking like very, very little. We're talking about none. So there's even and then in follow-up posts, like if somebody, naturally it's a corporate blogger, so they're making the post, but then they would not address any of sometimes very heated discussions in the comments. It was just kind of left to go on and not seen as informing any sort of continued dialogue or assistance in refining their environmental reporting process.
Those at 38% actually talked about how they involved stakeholders in identifying what they would report. So again, less than the majority, but 38% would say this is how we involve stakeholders in identifying what we report. They were much more likely actually to identify stakeholders and other groups for their environmental initiatives. Like we're involving these universities and this group and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of that, but they didn't really involve them in the reporting process and helping them identify what they should be reporting to the stakeholders to meet stakeholder needs. In terms of what they are actually reporting, what information they are reporting, for the most part, they're reporting. What we saw a lot of was the reporting of their policies and their goals, and a lot of the very positive stuff that showed that they really cared about the environment, which was interesting because when I was doing this and reading about Exxon and how much they cared about that, a press release came out or a news story came out, certainly in Fortune, about how the CEO of Exxon basically said, we don't really care about the environment. we're not green. Yeah, he pretty much says that's not our job. Our job is not to worry about the environment. Our job is to provide energy.
Didn't Ford and GE, didn't either Ford or GE, no, it was Ford. It was Bob Lutz that said he doesn't care about the environment.
He doesn't care about it
He doesn't care at all.
Yeah. So, and so here they're talking about how much they care about it, and then then you get this, the CEO says, that's not our job. Our job is to provide energy.
Is there context around that? I mean, I'm just sort of stunned that he would say that bald face of that.
Well, of course, that's the reporter's interpretation of that.
There's got to be some context.
It's kind of a Milton Friedman type of thing.
Yeah.
With,
right.
social responsibility. And you have to admire his honesty. I mean, nothing else.
So they provided environmental policies, environmental goals, awards and recognitions were really high. How people like us. Environmental investments. 60% had a statement from the CEO, which would seem to indicate that it's at the top level about the concern.